Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
We are going to talk about different types of lines that we may explore in a visual composition. There are different ways of applying line on paper with the help of same pencils, brushes or anything else, but there are different ways to handle them. So, not every time we put it in a very explicit manner. There are ways to put them in a tricky manner, or we keep on experimenting with that. The most common of all are the implied applications of line, that we make the line by combining a series of points, but it does not show, but the form gets revealed. So, we will see how to get that. Another formation that we have already talked about, we are going to realize that with some examples, that is a formation of a psychic line. It is more like a psychic formation. Most of the time we go by the eye direction. So, without making the line, we get a feel of a line, and it directs us towards one point where the artist wants the viewer to look at. So, we will see how to solve those problems by making them and also checking how effective they are. So, the most common examples of the implied lines are when we are not drawing the shape, but we are getting the lines accordingly. So, we draw this three shapes in three different directions on the paper, but we also get another shape in between with the connection, that is a triangular shape, which is not drawn at all. So, this is perhaps one example of an implied line. So, here the line that is formed here to delineate the shape of a triangle, it is of course implied. It can also happen in a same manner, maybe another variation of the same thing must be and it results into a square shape, which is implied. So, that is one formation. We can see that in more serious compositions, like in some instance, if it works this way, that there are figures which are maybe a bright white in color, and we do not want a contour line to come there. If we go by our earlier knowledge, that the moment we make a contour line, that gives us the sense of a surface. If the line is this thick, we will know in our mind that this is not a glossy surface. We can have a line maybe thinner, that is a shinier surface. It can be even more shinier when we leave some part that will almost glow. So, in that sense, if we try to create certain things which is not as abstract or clear as this, but what if we take an earlier example of making a flower in white. So, a white or a very high value color can be also shown in a very interesting way. Let us take example of a shape which is like a star. So, instead of making that shape, we can apply lines So, we have drawn many lines that gives us a sense of a shape, but we have decided not to use a contour line. So, we get the formation of a shape that is also can be associated with a star. So, star is the shape that is coming in the focal attention, at the same time there is no contour line. So, this is another example of a implied line formation. Let us realize that in the reverse manner. So, if we make the same star so, this is another formation which also gives us a shape of a star. Let us solve the problem at the center also by either putting them here. So, we have many lines, but no contour line as such. That is another example of an implied line formation. And then we are free to think of many other ways, many other tricks to get the implied lines to serve our purpose. So, when we position a series of line or a series of points or dots together, then our eye automatically tend to connect them, and that gives us the sense of some implicit line, that is otherwise known as implied lines, but a psychic formation is slightly different from that. So, in a psychic line, the real or physical line is not existing. None of the lines are existing, like either they are in the foreground or a middle ground. We get to see that there is in fact no line that exists there, but a mental connection between the two elements that are present in a composition. There can be two or more than two, but there has to be necessarily more than one object, or maybe a space which is as effective to work like an object. So, it is like a connection between two objects that occurs when something points in a certain direction. So, one eye direction will go to the next level and the eye will follow that. So, in that condition the psychic line formation may take place. So, let us see how we can create a situation like that. We will try to solve that with some of the known examples and some of the known way to solve that, but there are many ways to use psychic line formation in composition, and they can result into high effectivity. So, let us try and make some human forms to realize that factor. So, in a composition, if we decide our eye to move in different directions, we can make that happen with the help of human eyesights. So, this character is looking in one direction and our eye will tend to follow the same direction. So, that is one way of creating a linear formation, that if we have an object here, for example, another figure, so we will know that there has to be a common ground of standing. That is also another line formation. Without drawing this line, we can see that it has to be put down a little bit, so that these two characters can face each other. Even we will put the eye direction in such a way that these two characters face each other. So, without drawing a line here, we can give it a sense of a line. It can also happen that the moment the eye direction changes, for example, if the person looks up, instead of looking there, it will immediately go in a different direction. So, the line formation will come from this side to this side for sure, because this person is looking at this person, but the line that earlier was created in both direction, that will disappear then, and we will see another line formation in a different direction that will go up. So, let us see that in a different order, that there is one person, let us add another character who may sit there look up in another direction. It will create another linear formation. There can be another person in the same place looking at another side. So, we can afford to have another place where the eye will go, and we can also place an object here, maybe a book that he is reading, maybe some other thing. So, to direct the viewer's attention towards one object is possible by eye direction. Let us see that without much complication and with just a single option, because for this composition we had too many options. Somebody is looking up, somebody is looking down. Let us see how we solve the problem in another way. We may place a character. So, we have one character here. So, in this composition we only get to see two figures. One is a human figure, a sitting human figure, and another one is a bird. Now, there is no connection between the two. We can divide the space into two halves by cutting them, splitting them from somewhere in the middle, because the distance between the two objects are quite a lot. So, that way it is very difficult to connect them without a reason, unless the person has got something to do with the bird. If we see that the head is turned and the person is not looking at the bird, it becomes very difficult to make a connection. Like what is happening here is the bird is ignorant of somebody else's presence. So, the bird is not looking at the human character, but the human character is watching the bird. So, that way it is a one way connection that is created, but that is also effective. We could not have done without the eye direction. We will alter and see it again. Now, it can also happen that we create a human figure So, in this composition it is very difficult to integrate this two group of people. So, here we see that there are two people, they are grouped together, they are together of course, you cannot separate these two things because there is a great lot of overlapping that is taking place. It is happening here also in a reverse order, that there are two characters and there is a great amount of overlapping that is there. So, these two characters are connected through overlapping, but there is no connection between the two. So, in that way we can always separate the composition into two halves, we can call it as two compositions, composition 1 and composition 2, unless we have some common factor there. So, we can either integrate them with a common factor, that is again the common context that we talked about in our earlier lectures, that we can create unity through a common context. So, maybe they are passing through the same road, you can show the similar trees that are formed and that are continuous, maybe they are different, but they have some order, and you need more overlapping, more common overlapping. So, this is the minimum you can do to integrate them, but there is no psychic formation that is actually taking place there. Psychic formation can only happen when these figures are connected. So, when line becomes the main element of a visual expression, we call it a drawing. And there are two general types of drawing that we usually practice. They are like either based on the contour lines, or we make gesture drawings by using gesture lines. So, let us see how we make use of these two lines. So, when the line is used to follow the edge of a form to describe their observed outlines, the result is called a contour line, that we know. It is more like how it passes through the edge of a shape of an object. So, this is probably the most common use of line in visual design. Most of the time when we try to delineate a shape, we take help of contour line. There are very few cases when we use implied line to depict a contour. And there are lines that are often executed with tonal gradients to emphasize certain areas as well as the details of the other things that are often ignored. So, those kind of lines are called as gesture lines, and we can have a bunch of contour lines maybe to give us a sense of a gesture line. So, in gesture lines, the lines are not very well defined. We have a group of lines that are placed side by side, and we make a guess and we make out how which line is actually giving us the feel of a shape. So, gesture line is needed for a particular purpose when we emphasize on movement rather than shape. When we try to show a movement and we do not want to stick to a shape, we take help of gesture lines. So, let us see how it works. So, if we want a contour to be shown, the image also becomes a little more static. So, in a character like this, So, this is one drawing with a very well defined contour line. We want this character to have a very well defined contour, and we do not want a movement to take place there, because this is very important to show the shape. It may happen with a human form. We can also create forms which are well defined, like this, very well defined. It can also have another object here with a very well defined contour line. We can have variation in a contour line, some parts very thick, some not so thick. But this is for sure that there is no ambiguity in this contour or maybe in the border. It is as clear as a map or a topographical formation. So, let us see, if we want movement, how we create a variation from this. So, if we want a person in action, we go for the gesture. So, a person in action will be in an emphasized gesture like this. So, gesture lines may allow us with many things, like gesture line allows some transparency in the gesture, that the overlapping can happen in many different ways, because there is no definite line in its edge, but it is a bunch of line that is shown. So, we can show different interesting actions by the use of gesture lines, and they are most useful for quick sketches, and there can be also combinations of form where we have a combination of a contour line and a gesture line together. So, it can also happen that it may emphasize some of the action in contrast to a static line. It can also happen in a way that if we want to show a moving figure that is not static at all, we can create multiple formation, combine them and experiment in that order. So, all this implied line, psychic line formation with the help of contour line and gesture line, or maybe by creating no lines, but just giving a sense of a linear formation, we can face a lot of pictorial problems, and we can solve it in a very successful manner. So, in our next lecture, we are going to discuss how line can be used as units, and then by repeating lines, how we can create the body or a volume. So, how to use line as a building block, and then how we go by the construction of line, how we deconstruct and how we reconstruct a shape, and how we go more creative and innovative in our visual representation.